and go ahead and give us the demo. And then maybe when we're done, Robin or Rebecca may have some questions, or maybe myself. And with that, Sesh, go ahead. I see your desktop, so let it rip.
Thank you. Welcome to the Zettaset demo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the install process real quick. Support whatever Jim said in terms of simplicity, easy to install, high availability, role-based access control, security, and things like that. So that's what I'm going to walk you through. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is the install process. So the install process is very simple, repeatable. No professional services needed. As you see, the install is done through a web UI. And it walks you through multiple screens, and you just click, and then you get the install done with the Hadoop distribution of your choice. And then in addition to that, if you see here, you have the centralized logging, data at rest encryption, data network encryption, which is data in motion encryption, and Nagios, which is the alert mechanism, and then the applications like HBase, Hive, MapReduce, everything gets installed automatically. So there's a lot of automation process that goes, behind the scene. The Hadoop administrator has to simply click check boxes. He doesn't have to know anything. Everything is taken care of by our automation. Unlike some of our competition, which uses pro services, which are very error-prone and not repeatable. So this also extends to when you expand the cluster by adding additional data nodes. When you want to add more HDFS space, or your jobs are taking more time, you want to improve performance. When you expand your cluster, security gets expanded along with our add node option. So everything is very simple. In addition to this, we also have Active Directory integration at the time of installation. We have Kerberos, which is very key, and most of our distributions find it difficult to integrate into the distribution. We do it at the time of the installation, and when I show the HA, the HA goes across all the services, not only for the Hadoop components like NameNode and Resource Manager. So that's the power of our installation. Install time typically for a 10 node with all these security features plus the application, it takes around 40 minutes for a 10 node cluster, around 140 minutes for a 53 node cluster, including security, applications, and Hadoop distribution of your choice. So this is the power of our installation. As I said, it is simple to start, easy to install, and it is fast enough to get the cluster up and running. So now I'm going to go and show our role-based access control and HA in action. So what you're seeing here is a Hadoop cluster, Zettaset 7.0 version running with HTTP 2.1, which is the Hortonworks distribution. So if on the left-hand side, if you see, the services are listed, and all services are in HA mode. Especially the new Yarn-based Resource Manager, which is in HA, Uzi, Node Manager, NameNode. All the services which can fail, which can bring the cluster down, are all made in an HA. So our note about our HA is the HA framework is so easy to bring in services, and the patent that we have got approved is for removing the split brain syndrome. Typically, when a master node goes down, and you have a typical HA in process, and then another node gets selected, but suddenly if the administrator sees one of the master node going down, if he starts the service, you might have a situation where you will have two masters running, and the cluster is getting confused. So we have a patented technology that removes the split brain syndrome, and the HA is available across. As I said, Job Tracker or Resource Manager or a NameNode, these are all Hadoop components. However, there are other components like Kerberos, Key Manager for data at rest encryption. Those are all again very key to the cluster. Even if NameNode is available, if Kerberos goes down, you have a cluster down situation. That is what our HA framework across all the services helps the Hadoop cluster to keep going without any manual intervention. What I'm going to quickly show here is, I want to show you a live failover of a resource manager, so that you can quickly see how our HA really works. If you see this KRB5 is the Kerberos name node, is a typical name node, Hadoop name node, and Woozy is a workflow service, and that's again available as a HA. So what I'm going to do, you see this resource manager, they are running as a master, candidate, and candidate. Typical installation of Zettaset HA requires a 3-node configuration to start with. You can either go with 3, 5, 7, depending on the redundancy and the data size of the cluster that you have. Now you have one of the nodes running as master, remaining or waiting for election. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to force this resource manager master to go down, so that you will see how we elect another candidate as a master, so that the jobs can still continue to run while the resource manager node went down. So you see the node 1 stopped, and node 3 became a master now. So if I go and see, I'm seeing the service has stopped, so I'm going to go and start the service and see whether it is becoming a master or it's becoming a candidate. Look at so this is just waiting for election. So that means it is seeing already a master running, so it doesn't promote itself as a master, although it was running a master service in the past. So this is our split brain syndrome that possibly will occur if you don't have the prevention for that in place. So the HA, as I said, is across, especially for Hive with our BI connector. Jim was talking about analytics. For users who are querying Hive server from a remote place with the BI application, trying to either run a report or trying to query the database. If the HA is not there, with the automated failover is not there, if Hive service goes down, or the database that is holding the Hive tables goes down, the BI user is left high and dry without able to getting its report done. Whereas in this case, what will happen is the automated failover will kick up and then have the report and the query going on without any problem for the BI user. So that's the benefit of our HA from cluster-wide perspective, not only for Hadoop component perspective. So I'm going to now go back to role-based access control that Jim was talking about in terms of access control for the data that is in HDFS and Hive and HBase and any other application that the administrator possibly installs on the cluster. So we have a fine-grained role-based access control. So we package 5 roles in the product out of the box. If the 5 roles are not enough, the administrator can go and create his own role, so that you can have a fine-grained access control for the applications that are going into the cluster. For example, you go into the manage roles in the administrator menu. You see a bunch of roles already prepackaged for the user. In case if this is not enough, you can go and create new roles and then apply certain permissions for the role. For example, you want to have somebody running only MapReduce, you can create a MapReduce operator and have certain permissions applied to the role. So it is so fine-grained. We have organizational units, administrator, normal user, cluster administrator, and cluster data analyst role. These roles, they come from the Active Directory that was integrated at the time of installation. The way that we bring on users is, mimic Active Directory that you have the enterprise already set up. In a typical IT or software industry, you have organizational unit that I have listed here, and these units have been added by the administrator for the users to log on and start using it. The key thing here is the groups and the user information that you see in the drop-down is brought from the Active Directory that got integrated from at the time of the installation. So this is exactly what we pulled. You don't have to create the policies as Jim was saying. We integrate into the existing IT infrastructure so that the administrator life is very easy, so that the policies extend themselves to the newly created Hadoop cluster that Zettaset Orchestrator is running on. So that's actually a role that an administrator can go and create. And you can also have users that can be created locally and authenticated locally by the Zettaset Orchestrator database, in addition to the Active Directory and LDAP authentication mechanism. So what I'm going to do now, since I'm an administrator, I was able to see I have overwhelming privileges across the cluster. Now I'm going to log out and log in as a normal user and show how our MapReduce UI and our Oozie UI extend to the normal user. So this user belongs to a multiple organizational unit. Multiple organizational unit, and you can see this, he is going to have access only to the data that he has access to. He doesn't see anybody else's data. So this is our HDFS browser. This is so powerful that you can see, the users that log on to the cluster need not even go into the command line. They can see the, the HDFS file system from our browser like this. So you can go and apply permissions on the directories and on the files instead of going into command line and trying to figure out how to change read-write permissions. You can click on the folder and you can go and apply permission. That's the power of our UI here. Now, the user has logged on. Now, what is he going to do? He is going to run some MapReduce job or Oozie workflow. So, this particular user has already run, has created, MapReduce job here. You have to bring your, the jar file or whatever mapper and reducer class you have here, and then simply save the file, and it is going to run the MapReduce job. So you don't have to depend on class, CLI. But although you have all the role-based access control extended to CLI as well, but this makes the life of the user very easy. For example, the Oozie workflow here, it's so easy to go and walk through right from the ETL process to the actual MapReduce Hive query, and then come up with analysis on the data set that has been created here. So when I go and run the Oozie workflow, it's going to run the entire flow right from ETLing the data and then running the MapReduce, and then the Hive query and things like that. So when I log out and log in as another user, this user is not going to see any of the data that Alan has created. That's our powerful, RBAC in action. For example, now Alan has already created the Oozie workflow. Oozie workflow is running. Now he logs out and goes up. And now I log in from another organizational unit called HR, and HR1 is the user. Now I log in as HR1, and I want to go and use my, my data set for running MapReduce job or Hive query. Now, if you see here, he doesn't even see engineering or QA, that organizational unit that Alan was seeing. So when HR user logs in, he only sees that particular user's data. And when you go into MapReduce, he doesn't even see the MapReduce job that Alan was running. So this is the role-based access control. So from the HDFS, it is file and directory level. At the MapReduce, it's at the queue level. And if you want to click on the Oozie workflow, he doesn't see the Oozie workflow that Alan had created. So that's the protection there from UI. Now, if I want to go and show the same thing from command line, so as Alan, I'm trying to run this jar file. This is a MapReduce file, and I'm able to go and start the MapReduce from command line as well. So the other thing I wanted to show real quick is the HBase that we provide in terms of column family, cell level, permissions on HBase table. So this user on the command line is, the same user, Alan, and he has given permissions for users called Sesh and Tim on the employee master table with a different column family. For Sesh, the column family name is a read-only access for him, but whereas if you see Tim can see the salary column family level from the HBase employee master table. So both at the command line as well as at the UI, you can have the role-based access control. So the other thing that we wanted to show is, at the administrator level, which user is having what sort of permissions and where is he coming from, right? So if you see Alan is coming from engineering and PM organization unit, and he has got admin role in engineering, a normal user role in PM, and he has got different access for permissions for HDFS, different permissions for MapReduce, Hive, and HBase, and so on. So this simple UI will solve the problem for administrator to see who has got what access across all the applications against each of the user and the roles. So in addition to that, the logging mechanism that we have, will make sure that the policy that has been enforced is being met by the audit and the logging mechanism. The logging server that when I showed you the install screen at the time, you select a centralized logging server, and then what happens is whether it is 3 node or 3,000 nodes, all these logs go into this logging server, and from a single UI and from the administrator perspective, you click manage logs, and then you come into this screen. So the facility here is, whether it is, you want to see whether Hive permissions have been changed or HBase permissions have been changed, you can come and filter for those from the centralized logging facility here. You can either select the node, you can filter the information per node, or you can filter, the messages per services, whether it is job tracker or name node or web service that you want to track, and look for the log messages. You can filter like that, or you can have a date range and you wanted to filter messages from a given start and start date and end date and the start time and end time, and then apply. It's going to filter the messages for you. So the logging facility is centrally stored and centrally monitored and centrally queried. You don't have to switch UIs, unlike the other distributions that are in the market. So the end-to-end, in a summary, you have a fast deployment. You get security in terms of curb rows, data at rest, data in motion, and you get all the applications that extended. The security gets extended to the applications that gets installed. Plus, you have the fine-grained role-based access control for all the applications, including Hadoop's HDFS, and then any other NoSQL like HBase or Hive Metastore, and this gets extended to the BI connector, where a situation where the BI user connects to this Hive database. So the role-based access control, like this as an Alan user or HR1 user trying to access it through the JDBC or the ODBC connectivity through BI connector, the role-based access control gets extended as well. And then the HA and the role-based access control, it gets extended so that you have real access control on the database, whether it is native to the cluster or outside connection from outside the cluster. So that is pretty much it I wanted to cover today. Back to Eric and Jim.
That was a fantastic demo, I have to tell you. I really appreciate you kind of hammering through all that. But you really did an excellent job of showing all the bits and pieces that go in. So I've got a couple of questions, and maybe someone else has a question too. But just to kind of understand overall what you're doing, basically you guys have created a management shell that goes outside the entire Hadoop ecosystem, which thus allows companies to have things like security and governance and visibility into who's doing what. Is that a fair assessment?
I think the only other word I'd add to that, Eric, is transparently. That's why we don't work with any specific distribution of the open source. We work with all of them. And we allow people to have choices whether they're running on HTTP or CDH or raw Apache. We give them a choice of distributions, and so that is fair. And I think the other thing that you touched on is, since we're sitting at that point in the stack, although the specific technology we're applying this to today is Hadoop, we've created a framework that we feel that we can apply over time to other NoSQL technologies. And the first one that we showed here today was HBase.
Okay, this is great stuff. And just because I have you guys on the line here, something I think maybe a lot of people don't know about Hadoop and all these different distributions is that, at least theoretically, you're supposed to be able to have even one cluster set up to have multiple different versions, right? Like you could have a cluster set up with both Cloudera and Hortonworks nodes on it, right? Isn't that supposed to be the case?
Well, that could be possible, but the problem is that they're managed under different entities, right?
Right.
So the Cloudera guys would not be managing the Hortonworks cluster, if you will, or the Hortonworks nodes. That would be managed through either a separate tool or under Ambari. So that's the problem, is that Ambari really only manages HTTP, and Cloudera only really manages CDH. But at the end of the day, those are just open source distributions. So our view is, no matter where you start and what distribution you start with, essentially you can manage that with our product. It gives more choices, because not all the distributions have the same components in them, in terms of not just components, but version of components. And so it's a bit of a mess. So being able to kind of take that off the table and let people choose whatever version of Hadoop they want to work with, essentially that allows us to essentially come in and help them with this feature set that is not existing in the open source.
Yeah, that's right. And you've really, I like the term hardened, because that's what you guys are doing, right, is you're providing the bits and pieces of functionality that are required for enterprise caliber software. And traditionally what has happened is vendors like IBM and SAP and Oracle and all the rest, Informatica, and you could name probably 150 others, they are the ones who provide the soup to nuts version of their software. But what's happening here is you've got these open source movements which are doing great stuff, no doubt about that, but still, let's face it, it's not in their best interest at the moment at least to harden specific aspects of this. They're just kind of going as fast as they can to roll out and improve functionality that does specific things, but those specific things do not include, at least at the moment, stuff like the hardening of security and governance and transparency, right?
That's correct. And I think there's lots to do within the open source ecosystem itself, and you hit on that. And I think that there are a lot of people that are inwardly focused on the open source itself, and it's just a matter of focus. So that's good focus for us too, because that ecosystem needs to get fleshed out. We need to get that thing to have more functionality in it, to have ease of use and access to data and data integrity and all those good things. But, you know, they're not focused on, other vendors are not focused in specific on some of the features and some of the functions that we're addressing. And at the end of the day, we all benefit if we can get more eyes on Hadoop, and more importantly, we get people to move from 10 and 20 node clusters to production where it's more like 200 and 2,000 node clusters. So that's the issue that we're addressing. One other thing that we're addressing is that at the state of the software today, if you have a major new release of a distribution, you know, the issue is that you have to pave over the cluster, meaning you have to reinstall everything. And that's okay when you got 10 or 20 nodes. That's not going to be okay when you have you know, huge data stores sitting on as much as 1,000 nodes in a cluster. That's going to be a big disruption, and how do you save the data while you pave over it, all those kind of issues. So one thing that we're focused on is how do we actually provide more of a component approach, where if there's a new open source component that gets updated, you don't wait for it to be contained in a new distribution, you basically just update that component. So over time, as a vendor, we're trying to really separate the functionality between the open source and the production environment in a way that you don't absorb the instability of the open source. So that's another thing. And one last thing I'll add to that, there's been a ton of hype around 2.0. There are people still running a lot of 1.x clusters out there. So this is an issue for them. And basically making that migration from 1.x to 2.x, which a lot of people aren't talking about, is really going to get people to actually deploy, because some people are waiting for the stability of 2.x because they're worried about 1.x, 2.x upgrade. 1.x uses Job Tracker, and 2.x uses Yarn. So we actually, in our software, we support in one stream of technology all the 1.x users, and we support in another stream the 2.x users, and then we're working on a means by which we can migrate them without having to pave over the cluster.
Yeah, that's fantastic stuff. Yeah, Robin?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of things here that I find, really, if you like, quite interesting. It does look to me like the use of Zettaset as a security package is actually fairly not actually that difficult in terms of the imposition it is in terms of managing the cluster. Often an objection to security is that it impacts performance, and of course it's bound to impact performance to a certain level. What do you know about the impact of Zettaset on, well, let's just imagine a typical kind of Hadoop job.
Yeah, so if you're looking at just data at rest encryption, which basically is doing partition level encryption for, the threat case is somebody actually physically removing and taking a server. That's less than 3% impact of performance. Where it starts to get tricky is if you get more granular in terms of all of the controls on keys per user down to block level. So as you start to deepen the security element in terms of the granularity of the encryption that you're implying, that starts to have more of a pronounced impact on performance. We're thinking at that granularity it's somewhere between 8 and 10%. Now, our job as a security vendor is to figure out means by which we can actually do data in motion and very granular encryption with having comparable performance levels as the static encryption. But that's what we're working on in terms of our phase 2 encryption.
Right, so that's ongoing in terms of what you're doing to. I mean, I'm not. Do you actually have any competition in space? I'm not aware of any competition in space, but I'm well aware of the need for this kind of thing. There are a whole series of what I would call commercial sectors, banking in particular, but also I think the health sector would be that way. The insurance, health insurance particularly. That they're not going to use Hadoop in anger without actually this level of security. I mean, this is actually quite fine-grained security. I was quite surprised as you went through it. In a way, I mean, I know you've already presented to us, but the demo makes it, the level of the security in the demo just came completely clear to me watching it. I thought it was brilliant. It demos very well is probably what I would say. So, that's my kind of perception. What are you experiencing in terms of level of demand for this?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because it just, again, points to the state of the market and where we're at. A lot of these people last year that were evaluating the technology, in my opinion, were doing it in unsecure environments. And so what happens is that's more of a technology evaluation of Hadoop, if you will, and how we can use it and map reduce and apply the jobs, blah, 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 all that good stuff. Now, this year, what we're seeing as early as January was the new, the new infusion of the requirement around security. And what that means is that people are getting more serious about, hey, I like this, I have a business need for this, I have to deploy it in the data center, though, and I have compliances and other things that I have to meet within the data center that I need to meet before I can actually deploy this stuff. And we've had some banks that, told us, hey, we're going to go to 400 nodes, 1,000 nodes last year. They're still sitting on 20-node clusters, mainly because a new person is involved around security, setting requirements on that and higher reliability and some of the hardening things that we talked about. So that's actually, we're seeing very good demand in evaluation. And hopefully, as these guys check off their list, this year, we're going to see some more deployment. So still predominantly evaluation, but a different set of requirements from what we saw a year ago and something we anticipated as Zettaset.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we've observed as well. An awful lot of Hadoop usage is actually usage in proof of concept type of things or in kind of sandbox applications where they're testing out to see if it works. They aren't, there's a lot of Hadoop out there that's not been put into production, and you can get away with, doing an awful lot of work on Hadoop and not putting it into production without any security. But as soon as you actually put it in production, especially in sectors that have got any kind of regulatory overview, you really actually have to have it. I mean, it's just not really acceptable without it. So I presume you'll see, a boost in that in the coming couple of years. I mean, the thing that we've noticed is that once Yarn came in, the level of enthusiasm for Hadoop, and I know it was there in terms of, it was very fashionable, but now, in terms of, it looks like we're going to be using this indefinitely into the future. That's what we perceive.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And my own comment around Yarn in 2.0 is that it's new, which means it still has some stability and growing pains we got to work through and so forth. And you got to think about how you're going to get people from 1.x to 2.x. But I think that Yarn as a resource manager shows a lot of promise. People are very interested in it, but there's still a lot of people still running Job Tracker 1.x out there that you have to take care of as well. But I think Yarn is the future, and that's why we're supporting it in our product.
So let me just ask one more question, and this is obviously a very difficult question to answer because there can be, various sizes of implementations for Hadoop. But how much overhead, just in terms of management of the environment, do you think that this kind of security places on a Hadoop installation?
Like I said, it depends on the granularity of your encryption and the types of controls you want to put on the data. But it can vary anywhere from 3 to 10%, depending on the encryption levels you want to apply. It's kind of you get what you pay for, and the more granular you want to be in protecting the data and the roles and the access and so forth, the more overhead that heads to the job. But essentially, that's kind of up to the user in terms of how they weigh those priorities and benefits. Now, in the meantime, we're going to try and whittle that number down as low as we can in terms of providing fine-grained encryption and access control without, severely impacting performance. And that's just a development task we'll take on now that we have the base elements in place.
Okay. Well, I haven't got any more questions. Anybody else got any questions?
That's it. This is a fantastic demo, guys. I'm really impressed. I'm a little bit surprised that you haven't seen more focus on this. I know that the big guys, Hortonworks and Cloudera, are focusing on it now, but you know how the game works in enterprise software. If you get a head start, if you have a lead, it's kind of hard to overcome that lead for the competitors. So I say good for you guys and well done.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think this is, there's been so much hype at the market level, and I think what Seth showed you today was what real fine-grained RBAC is. And we read it in the press, we read it in the news, but this is the real thing in terms of how you have real fine-grained control on multiple stores. That's what people are looking for, and we've been at this for 2 years. And so we've had our head down as the market's been developing, and we've been finishing out the product, and we've been focused on the number one issue, which is security, along with other hardening issues, but the number one is security. And, we're able to deploy 50 nodes in 45 minutes. So being able to repeat that process, apply policy once, and then actually scale it across a growing cluster, those are the things that people are looking for.
Yeah, that's right. Well, folks, have been talking to Jim Vogt and Sesh Ramaswamy of Zettaset. Well done. Thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up to you next time, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.